Hi, my name is Salvatore Casto, and I'm going to be reading Book 16 of the Iliad, Patroclus Fights and Dies, as translated by Ian Johnston. While the men kept on fighting at the well-decked ships, Patroclus went to Achilles, his peopled shepherd, shedding warm tears, like a fountain of dark water whose stream flows over the lip of a sheer rock face. Looking at him, swift-footed, godlike Achilles felt pity. So he spoke to him. His words had wings. "Why are you crying, Patroclus, like some girl, an infant walking beside her mother, asking to be picked up? She pulls the robe and stops her mother strolling on ahead, looking up at her in tears, until the mother lifts her up. You're crying just like that girl, Patroclus. Is there something you need to say to the Myrmidons or me? Some news from Phthia that only you have heard? People say Menetius, Actor's son, is still living, and Peleus is alive, Aeacus' son, among his Myrmidons. If these two had died, we'd have something real to grieve about. Or are you feeling sad for Argives as they're being obliterated among the hollow ships for all their pride? Speak up. Don't conceal what's on your mind. Then we'll both understand." With a heavy sigh, horseman Patroclus, you then replied, "Achilles, Peleus' son, by far the strongest of Achaeans, don't be angry with me. Such great despair has overcome the Argives, for all those who used to be the bravest warriors are lying at the ships with sword and spear wounds. Powerful Diomedes, son of Tydeus, hit by a spear, famous spearman Odysseus with a stab wound, and Agamemnon too. An arrow struck Eurypylus in the thigh. Many healers, exceptionally skilled in various medicines, are with them now, tending their wounds. But it's impossible to deal with you, Achilles. I hope anger like this rage you're nursing never seizes me. It's disastrous. How will you be of use to anyone in later generations if you won't keep shameful ruin from the Argives? You're pitiless. Perhaps horseman Peleus was not your father, nor Thetis your mother. The gray sea delivered you, some tall cliff, for you're an unyielding heart. If your mind shuns some prophecy or your noble mother has told you news from Zeus, at least send me, and quickly, with the others in our troop of Myrmidons. I could be a saving light for the Danaans. Give me your armor to buckle round my shoulders, so Trojans, mistaking me for you, may stop the fight. Then Achaeans' warriors' sons could get some rest. They're worn out. War doesn't offer much relief. We're fresh, so we should easily repulse the Trojans, tired of the battle noise, back from our ships and huts towards the city." Patroclus finished his entreaty. How wrong he was. He was praying for his own death, his dreadful fate. Swift-footed Achilles, with some heat, replied, "My dear divinely born Patroclus, what are you saying? I'm not concerned with any prophecy I know about, nor has my noble mother said a thing from Zeus. But dreadful pain came in my heart and spirit when that man wished to cheat someone his equal and steal away the prize, and just because he has more power. That really hurt, given that I've suffered in this war so many pains here in my chest. Achaea's sons chose that girl as my prize. I won her with my spear, once I destroyed her strong-walled city. Lord Agamemnon took her back out of my hands as if I were some stranger without honor. But let that be. It's over, done with. Besides, my spirit does not mean to stay enraged forever, although I thought I would not end my anger until the cries of warfare reached my ships. Come, put my famous armor on your shoulders and lead war-loving Myrmidons to battle, since black clouds of Trojans now surround the ships, expecting victory, and Argives stand crammed in the sea shore, with little space, while a city full of Trojan comes at them without fear, because they don't see near them my helmet with its glittering front. Soon enough, they'd be running back, filling the gullies with their dead, if mighty Agamemnon treated me with their kindness. But now they fight all through our camp, for there's no spear raging in the fists of Diomedes, son of Tydeus, to protect Danaans from disaster. I've not heard the voice of Agamemnon crying out this vile head. As for Hector, that man-killer's voice echoes everywhere, shouting at Trojans who fill all the plain with their noise as they defeat Achaeans into this battle. Even so, Patroclus, you must stave off disaster from the fleet. Go after them in force. They may fire those ships and rob us of the journey how we crave. Now, pay attention to what I tell you about the goal I have in mind for you, so you'll win me great honor and rewards, so all Danaans will send back to me that lovely girl and give fine gifts as well. Once you push Trojans from the ships, come back. If Zeus, Hera's mate, who loves his thunder, gives you the glory, don't keep on battling those war-loving Trojans with me absent. You would decrease my honors. Don't let the joy of fighting and of killing Trojans lead you on to Ilion, just in case some deathless Olympian god attacks you. Apollo, the far worker, loves his Trojans, so make sure you come back here again once your saving light has reached our ships. Let others keep on fighting in the plain. O Father Zeus, Athena, and Apollo. If only no single Trojan or Achaean could escape death, and just we two alone were not destroyed, so that by ourselves we could take Troy's scattered battlements. As these two were talking on like this together, Ajax was losing ground, under attack from spears, overcome by the will of Zeus and Trojans, who kept throwing weapons. The bright helmet on his head rattled dangerously as it was struck. Many hits landed on the well-made armor on his cheeks. His left shoulder was worn out from always holding up his shining shield. But for all the onslaught with their spears, the Trojans could not budge him. Still, he was in trouble, breathing heavily, sweat pouring down in rivulets from every limb. He had no time for any rest. In every way, his desperate plight was getting worse. Tell me now, you muses living on Olympus, how the fire first got tossed onto Achaean ships. It was Hector. He came up close to Ajax, then with his great sword hacked at Ajax's ash spear right behind the point. He cut straight through it. Telamonian Ajax still gripped the spear, but it was useless without its bronze spear head, which fell some distance off, clanging on the ground. The heart in mighty Ajax recognized God's work. He shuddered, for he perceived how high-thundering Zeus was denying completely all his fighting skill, wanting the Trojans to prevail. Ajax backed off out of range. Then onto that swift ship the Trojans threw untiring fire, which spread itself immediately in a fiery blaze that no one could extinguish. The ship's stern started to catch fire. At that moment, Achilles, slapping his thighs, said to Patroclus, "Up now, divinely born Patroclus, master horseman. In the ships I see destructive flames going up. Trojans must not seize our ships and leave us, wish no way to escape. Put armor on, and quickly. I'll collect those soldiers." Achilles spoke, Patroclus dressed in gleaming bronze. First, he fixed on his shins the beautiful leg armor, fitted with silver ankle clasps. Around his chest he put on the body armor of Achilles, swift-footed descendant of Aeacus, finely worked and glittering like a star. On his shoulders he then slung his bronze-silver studded sword and a large, strong shield. On his powerful head he set the famous helmet with its horsed-hair crest. The plume on top nodded, full of menace. Then Patroclus took 2 strong spears well fitted to his grip. He did not choose Achilles' spear, for no Achaean man could wield that weapon, so heavy, huge, and strong, except for brave Achilles. It was made of ash wood from the peak of Pelion. Chiron gave it to Achilles' father to kill warriors. Patroclus told Automedon to yoke the horses quickly, the man he most esteemed after Achilles, breaker of men, and the one he trusted most to carry out his soldiers in a battle. For Patroclus, Automedon put swift horses in the harnesses, Xanthus and Balius, who flew along as swiftly as the wind. The horses Podraj and the Harpy had conceived with west wind, as she grazed in a meadow beside the stream of Oceanus. In the side traces he set Pedasus in harness, a fine horse Achilles had taken for himself when he captured the city of Eetion. Though immortal, it kept pace with his deathless horses. Meanwhile, Achilles went to and fro among the huts, getting all his Myrmidons to arm themselves. They rushed out like flesh-eating wolves, hearts full of unspeakable fury, beasts which in the mountains have caught and ripped apart some huge antlered stag. Then in a pack they charged off, jaws all dripping blood, to lap back black surface water with their slender tongues in some dark spring, vomiting up clots of blood from their crammed bellies, while in their chests their hearts are resolute. That's how the leaders and commanders of the Myrmidons rushed around brave Patroclus, comrade of swift Achilles, Aeacus' descent, who stood among them there, urging on the horses and the warriors carrying their shields. Achilles had brought 50 ships to Troy. In each were 50 men, his own companions. He had picked 5 trusted leaders to give them orders. His great power gave him overall command. The first contingent was led by Menestheus, with his flashing breastplate, son of Serpgeus, the river fed from heaven. Lovely Polydoria, Peleus' daughter, had conceived Menestheus with timeless Serpgeus, a woman copulating with a god. But in the name of Boris was his father, son of Perearius, who married her in public, after paying out a huge price for the bride. The second group was led by warrior Eudorus, a bastard child of Polymele, Phylus's daughter, a lovely dancer. The god who slaughtered Argus, mighty Hermes, fell in love with when he noticed her among the singing maidens in the chorus, dancing for Artemis, the golden-arrowed goddess in the echoing hut. Hermes the helper, going at once into her upper room in secret, had sex with her. She bore him a fine son, Eudorus, outstanding as a warrior and speedy runner. But when Eileithia, goddess of labor pains, brought him into the light and he saw sunshine, then strong Eclecles, actor's son, took Polymele to his home, after giving an enormous bride price. Old man Phylus was very kind to the young boy. He looked after him, surrounding him with love as if he were his son. The third commander was warlike Pisander, son of Mammalus, a man preeminent among the Myrmidons, for spear fighting, second only to Patroclus. Phoenix led the fourth contingent, and Alcimedon, splendid son of Laerces, was leader of the fifth. Once Achilles had set all the ranks in order behind the leader, he addressed them sternly. My Myrmidons, let none of you forget those threats you spoke about by our swift ships while I was angry. You'd go on and on against the Trojans. Each of you blamed me. Cruel son of Peleus, surely your mother suckled you with bile, you pitiless man, who kept his comrades by their ships against their will. Why don't we go home in our seaworthy ship, since evil rage has fallen on your heart? That's what you men complained about me in your meetings. Now a great work of war awaits you, the sort of enterprise you used to love, so make sure each man's heart is resolute as you go to battle with these Trojans. With these words, Achilles stirred the spirit in each man. As they heard their king, the ranks bunched up more closely. Just as a man constructs a wall for some high house, using well-fitted stones to keep out forceful winds, that's how close their helmets and bossed shields lined up, shield pressing against shield, helmet against helmet, man against man. On the bright ridges of the helmets, horsehair plumes touched with when warriors moved their heads. That's how close they were to one another. In the front, ahead of them all, 2 men stood fully armed, Automedon and Patroclus, sharing a single urge to fight in the forefront of their Myrmidons. Achilles went into his hut and opened up the lid on a beautifully decorated chest, placed on board his ship by silver-footed Thetis for him to take. She packed it with cloaks and tunics and woolen blankets too, protection from the wind. There he kept an ornate goblet. Other than Achilles, no one used it to drink gleaming wine. With his cup, Achilles poured libations to no god but Father Zeus, taking this out of the chest. First he purified it with sulfur, then rinsed it out in streams of water. He washed his hands and drew some gleaming wine. Standing in the middle of the yard, he poured it out, gazing up at heaven. Thunder-loving Zeus looked on. Zeus, king, lord of Dodona, Pelagian, you who live far off, ruling cold Dodona, around whom live the Selli, your prophets with unwashed feet, who sleep upon the ground, you heard me when I prayed to you before. You gave me honor then by striking hard at the Achaean army. So grant me now while I still desire. I intend to stay beside this group of ships, but I'm sending out my comrade and my many Myrmidons. Send glory with them, all-seeing Zeus. Strengthen the heart inside his chest, so Hector sees if Patroclus can fight on alone, or if his hands are always conquering only when I'm with him in the raging war, in the center of the havoc Ares brings. When he's pushed the fight and battle noise back from the ships, let him return to me, here at my hollow ships without a scratch, with all his weapons and companions, men who battle in the killing zone. So Achilles prayed. Counselor Zeus heard his prayer. He granted part of it, part he denied. Father Zeus agreed that Patroclus should drive the battle fighting from the ships, but not that he would come back safely from the war. Once Achilles had made his libation and prayed to Father Zeus, he went back into his hut, put the goblet in his chest, came out, and stood there, before his hut, still wishing in his heart to see the fatal clash of Trojans and Achaeans. The armed warriors who went with brave Patroclus marched out in formation, until with daring hearts they charged the Trojans, immediately swarming out, like wasps beside a road, which young lads love to torment, constantly disturbing them in their roadside nests. Those fools make mischief for all sorts of people. If some man going past along the road upsets them by accident, they all swarm out with fearless hearts to guard their young. With that same heart and spirit the Myrmidons then poured out from their ships with a ceaseless roar. In a loud shout, Patroclus called out to his companions, "You Myrmidons, companions of Achilles, son of Peleus, be men, my friends. Recall your fighting strength, so we may honor the son of Peleus, by far the best Achaean at the ships, with the finest comrades in close combat. Wide-ruling Agamemnon, Atreus' son, will see his folly in not honoring Achilles, the best of the Achaeans." With these words, Patroclus spurred the strength and heart in every soldier. Then, in a massed group, they fell upon the Trojans. Terrifying cries came from Achaeans by their ships. When Trojans saw the brave son of Menoetius with his attendant, both in glittering armor, all their hearts were shaken and their ranks fell back. They thought Peleus' swift-footed son by his ships had set aside his anger and made friends again. Each man glanced around, checking how he might escape his own complete destruction. Patroclus was the first to throw his bright spear right at the central mast where most troops clustered. But by the stern part of his ship of great-hearted Protesilaus, he hit a man, Pyracames, who led Paeonian charioteers from Armidon, by the broad-flowing Axius. Struck by that spear in his right shoulder, he fell down, screaming on his back there in the dust. Comrades round him, his Paeonius ran off. Patroclus terrified them. Now he had killed their leader and best fighter. He drove them from the ships and doused the blazing flame. The half-burnt ship he left there. The Trojans scattered, making a tremendous noise. Danaans poured out from among the ships throughout the constant uproar. Just as from a high peak of some massive mountain, Zeus, who gathers lightning, shifts a bulky cloud, once more revealing all the peaks, high headlands, and mountain glades, while from heaven the huge bright sky breaks open. That's how Danaans saved their ships from fire and could rest, if only for a moment, since the fighting was not yet over. At this point, Achaean troops had not fully pushed the Trojans from the ships. They had been forced back from the sterns, but they still stood there, facing the Achaeans. The leaders then began to slaughter one another in the scattered fighting. First, Menoetius' brave son with his sharp spear struck Aurelius in the thigh as he was turning. He drove the bronze straight through, breaking the bone. Aurelius fell face down in the dirt. Then, warlike Menelaus hit Thoas in the chest, in a place where it was open right beside his shield. The blow collapsed his limb. Meges, Phyleus' son, saw Amphiclus charging at him, but hit him first, sparing the top of his leg where a man's muscle is the thickest. The spear point sliced his tendons, and darkness closed his eyes. Then the sons of Nestor went into action. Antilochus grabbed his sharp spear, and Atimneus, driving the bronze point in his side, so he fell forward. Maris, who was close by, angry about his brother, charged Antilochus, holding his spear, and then stood by his brother's body. But godlike Thrasymedes moved too quickly for him. Before Maris could thrust, he lunged out his shoulder. He didn't miss. The spear point sheared off muscle at the bottom of his arm and broke the bone in two. Maris fell with a crash, and darkness veiled his eyes. Thus, these two, slaughtered by two brothers, went off to Erebus. They'd seen Sarpedion's brave companions, spearmen sons of Amisodarus. He'd reared the changing chimera who killed so many men. Ajax, son of Oileus, jumped out at Cleobulus, captured him alive, stuck in that confusion. Even so, Ajax struck him with his sword across the neck, draining his fighting strength. The sword grew warm with blood. Dark death closed up his eyes, and strong fate embraced him. Then Peneleus and Lyson charged each other. Each had thrown his spear and missed, wasting the throw. So they went at one another once again with swords. Lyson struck the helmet ridge on its horsehair crest, but his sword shattered at the hilt. Then Peneleus slashed Lyson's neck below the ear. The sword bit deep, sinking the entire blade so Lyson's head hung over, held up on one side only by the uncut skin. His limbs gave way. Meriones, whose quick strides caught up with Acamas, then hit him with his spear in his right shoulder as he was climbing in his chariot. He tumbled out. A mist descended on his eyes. Idomeneus, pitiless bronze that struck Aramis right in his mouth. The spear forced itself straight through below his brain, splitting his white skull apart, smashing out his teeth. His eyes filled up with blood. More blood spurted from his nose and open mouths. Then death's black cloud enveloped Aramis. Thus these Danaan leaders each killed his man, just as ravenous mountain wolves suddenly attack young goats or lambs and seize them from the flock when in the mountains an inattentive shepherd lets them wander off. Once the wolves see them, they attack at once, for those young lack the heart to fight. That's how Danaans then went after Trojans, whose minds now turned to shameful flight, for they had lost their will to battle on. Great Ajax kept on trying to throw his spear at bronze-armed Hector, but Hector's battle skills kept his broad shoulders hidden behind his bull's hide shield. As he watched arrows and thudding spears flying past, Hector realized the tide of victory in the fight was changing, but he stood there, trying to save his loyal companions, just as those times a cloud comes from Olympus, moving from the upper air across the sky when Zeus brings on a rainstorm. That's how Trojans fled, yelling from the ships, crossing the ditch again in complete disorder. Hector's swift-footed horses carried him and his weapons back, leaving behind, against their will, the Trojans held up at the trench dug by Achaeans. In that ditch, many swift horses lost their masters' chariots when poles snapped at the end. In pursuit, Patroclus, intent on killing the Trojans, yelled fierce orders to Danaans. Meanwhile, the Trojans, shouting and scattering in panic, were jammed up in every pathway. Under the clouds a high dust storm rose as sure-footed horses strained to get away, leaving the huts and ships and rushing for the city. Whenever Patroclus saw the biggest crowd of soldiers in retreat, with a yell he charged at them. Bodies kept rolling underneath his axle as men fell out when chariot cars rolled over. His swift horses, those immortal beasts the gods gave as a priceless gift to Peleus, flew straight on across the ditch, charging forward. Patroclus' heart was set on finding Hector, eager to strike him down. But Hector's own swift horses carried him away, just as in late summer rainstorms the dark earth is all beaten down when Zeus pours out his waters with utmost violence, when he's enraged with men who have provoked him with their crooked judgments, corrupting their assemblies and driving justice out, not thinking of God's vengeance, so all the rivers crest in flood, their torrents carving many hillsides as they roared down from the mountains in a headlong rush toward the purple sea, destroying the works of men. That's how, as they sped on, the Trojans' horses screamed. When Patroclus had cut the Trojans' front ranks off, he pushed them back again towards the ships, keeping them from the city they were trying to reach. Between the ships, the river, and the lofty wall, in that middle ground he kept charging at them, killing them, avenging deaths of many comrades. There he first struck Pronus with his shining spear, where Pronus' shield had left his chest exposed. His limbs gave way and he fell down with a thud. Patroclus next rushed at Thestor, son of Enops, who just sat crouching in his polished chariot, paralyzed with terror, rein slipping from his hands. Coming up, Patroclus struck him with his spear, right on the jawbone, smashing through his teeth. Patroclus pulled his spear back, dragging Thestor out across the chariot rail. Just as a man sitting on a rock point hauls up a monstrous fish out of the sea using a line and bright bronze hook, that's how Patroclus dragged Thestor from his chariot, mouth skewered on the spinning spear. He threw him down, face first, as Thestor fell. His spirit abandoned him. Then Euryalus rushed up, but Patroclus struck him with a rock right on the head, smashing his entire skull inside his heavy helmet. Aeryalus collapsed face down in the dirt. Death, who destroys men's heart, followed all around Patroclus as he slaughtered Aramis, Amphoterus, Epoltes, Tilpalamus, son of Damastor, Echius, Phyrus, Iphias, Euippus, and Polymelus, son of Argeus. All those Patroclus laid out, one by one, on the earth which nourishes all men. When Sarpedon observed his Lycian companions, who wear no belt around their tunics, being cut down by the hands of Menetius' son Patroclus, he called out to reprimand his godlike Lycians. "Shame on you, Lycians! Where are you running? Now's the time for you to fight on bravely. I'll stand up to this man, so I'll find out who it is that fights so well, who brings with him so much destruction for the Trojans, breaking the limbs of many fearless soldiers." Sarpedon finished. He jumped out of his chariot, down to the ground, holding his weapons. On the other side, when Patroclus saw him, he leapt from his chariot. Then they rushed at each other, screaming like vultures, fighting with hooked talons and curved beaks, screeching on some rocky height. Looking down on the two men, the son of crooked-minded Cronos pitied them. He spoke to Hera, his sister, and his wife. "Alas, Sarpedon, dearest of all men, is fated now to die, killed by Patroclus, son of Menetius. My heart's divided as I think this over. Should I snatch him up while still alive and place him somewhere else, in his rich land of Lysira, far distant from his wretched fighting, or have him killed at the hands of Menetius' son?" Ox-eyed Queen Hera then replied to Zeus, "Dread son of Cronos, how can you say this? This man is mortal, doomed long ago by fate. Now you desire to rescue him from miserable death? Do as you wish, but we other gods will not all agree with you. And I'll tell you something else. Make sure you remember it. If you send Sarpedon home alive, take care some other god does not desire to send his dear son from the killing zone. Around Priam's great city, many men, sons of the immortals, are now fighting. You'll enrage those gods and make them bitter. But if Sarpedon's dear to you, if your heart feels pity for him, then let him be killed in a fierce combat at Patroclus' hands, son of Menetius. Once his living spirit has abandoned him, send death and sweet sleep to carry him away, back to the spacious land of Lycia, where his brother and his kinsmen will bury him with a mound and headstone. That's what's appropriate for those who die." Hera spoke. The father of gods and men agreed, but he shed blood rained down upon the ground. Tribute to his dear son Patroclus was about to kill in fertile Troy, far from his native land. The two approached within range of each other. Patroclus threw and struck renowned Thrasymachus, Lord Sarpedon's brave attendant, low in the gut. His limbs gave way. Then Sarpedon charged Patroclus. His bright spear missed him, but it struck a horse, Pedasus, in its right shoulder. The horse screamed, gasping for life, then fell down in the dust, moaning as the spear left him. The two other horses reared. Their yoke cracked, and their reins got intertwined with the trace horse Pedasus lying in the dust. But famous spearman Automedon cleared the tangle. Pulling out the long sword on his powerful thigh, he dashed in and, without a pause, cut the trace horse loose. The two other horses straightened out, then pulled together in their harness. The two men kept going, taking up again their heart-destroying combat. One more Sarpedon failed with his bright spear. Its bronze point sailed past Patroclus' left shoulder, missing him. Then Patroclus, in his turn, threw his bronze spear, which did not leave his hand in vain. It struck right between Sarpedon's midriff and his beating heart. Sarpedon toppled over, as an oak tree falls, or poplar, or tall mountain pine which craftsmen cut with sharpened axes to harvest timber for a ship. That's how he lay there, stretched out before his chariot and horses, groaning and clawing at the bloody dust. Just as a lion moves into a herd, then kills a bull, a sleek, great-hearted steer among the shambling cattle, which bellows as it dies right in the lion's jaws. That's how Sarpedon, leader of Lycian spearmen, struggled as he died, calling to his dear companion, "Glaucus, my friend, you warrior among men, now you must really show yourself a spearsman, a true courageous fighter. You must now embrace this evil war if you're brave enough. First, move round and urge the Lycian leaders to make a stand here by Sarpedon, and then you fight over me in person with your bronze. I'll be a source of misery for you, and shame as well for all your days to come. If Achaeans strip my armor now, I'm down among the fleet of ships. So hold your ground with force. Spur on the army. As he said this, death's final end covered Sarpedon's eyes and nostrils. Then Patroclus set his foot upon Sarpedon's chest, pulled his spear out of the body. The guts came with it. Soon in the same moment he tugged on the spear point and took Sarpedon's life. Myrmidons reined in the horses, snorting in their eagerness to bolt. Now they had left their master's chariot. When Glaucus heard Sarpedon's voice, he was overcome with savage grief, his heart dismayed that he could not have come to his assistance. With his hand he grabbed his and squeezed his wounded arm, still painful from being hit by Teucer's arrow. As he attacked him on that high defensive wall, Teucer had been defending his companions from disaster. So Glaucus prayed then to Apollo. Hear me, my lord. You may be in Lycia, somewhere in that rich land, or here in Troy, but you can hear a man's distress from anywhere. Bitter grief has now come in my heart, for I have this cruel wound. Sharp pains run up and down my arm. The flow of blood won't stop. The wound wears out my shoulder, so I can't grip my spear with any force, or move to fight against our enemies. And our finest man has perished, Sarpedon, child of Zeus, who would not assist his son. But, my lord, heal my savage wound at least, and ease my pain. Give me strength so I can call my Lycian comrades, urge them on to war, and I can fight in person by the corpse of our Sarpedon, now he's dead. So Glaucus spoke in prayer. Phoebus Apollo heard him. He eased the pains at once, stopped the dark blood flowing from the cruel wound, and filled his chest with fighting strength. In his heart, Glaucus recognized with joy that the great god had quickly heard his prayer. First, he moved around and spurred on Lycia's leading men in every spot to rally around Sarpedon. Then, with long strides, he went among the Trojans, to Polydamas, son of Pantheus, and brave Agenor. He searched out Achaeans and Hector dressed in bronze. Approaching him, he spoke. His words had wings. Hector, now you're neglecting all your allies, men who for your sake are far away from friends, their native land, wasting their lives away. You've no desire to bring assistance. Sarpedon, leader of Lycian spearmen, lies dead. The man who protected Lycia with his judgment and his power, slaughtered by Ares on the bronze spear of Patroclus. My friends, stand by him. Keep in your hearts your sense of shame in case the Myrmidons strip off his armor and mutilate his corpse in their anger at the dead Danaans, the ones killed by our spears at their fast ships. Glaucus finished. Trojans were completely overwhelmed with grief, unendurable and inconsolable, for Sarpedon had always fought to guard their city, although he was a distant stranger. Many soldiers followed him, and he was preeminent in war. Full of furious passion, they went to Danaans, Hector in the land, angry about Sarpedon. Patroclus, Menetius' son, with his strong heart, rallied the Achaeans. He spoke first to the Ajaxes, both eager for the fight. You two Ajaxes, now you must get your joy protecting us, as you've done before, but even better. The man who was the first to jump inside Achaea's walls lies dead, Sarpedon. We must try to mutilate the body, to seize and strip armor of its shoulders, slaughtering with our pitiless bronze any of his comrades who defend him. Patroclus spoke. The Ajaxes both were fiercely eager to fight off the enemy in person. Then both sides reinforced their ranks. Trojans and Lycians, Achaeans and Myrmidons, these forces struggled with terrific shouts across the dead man's corpse. The warrior's armor rang out harshly. Then Zeus, to make the fight for his dear son more difficult, spread ominous darkness over that fierce battle. At first, the Trojans pushed bright-eyed Achaeans back, for they hit a man who was by no means the worst among the Myrmidons, noble Epigeneus, son of great-hearted Agacles. He had once been king of populous Bodidum, but he killed a man, a noble relative. So he came a suppliant to Peleus and silver-footed Thetis, who sent him to follow man-destroying Achilles, to sail with him to Troy and fight the Trojans. Glorious Hector struck him as he grabbed the corpse. With a rock he hit his head and split the skull completely open inside his heavy helmet. Epigeneus collapsed face down on the corpse. Death, who destroys men's hearts, followed over him. Grief for his dead companion filled Patroclus. He moved through those fighting in the front like a swift hawk swooping down on daws or starlings. That's how fast, Patroclus, master horseman, you charged the Lycians and Trojans then, with anger in your heart for your companion. With a rock, he hit Syntheilus, dear son of Aithymenus, squarely in the neck, snapping the tendons. Those fighting in the ranks in front, including glorious Hector, moved back somewhat, as far as the long javelin flies when it is thrown by a man in competition showing off his strength, or in a battle with a murderous enemy. That's how far Achaeans forced the Trojans to move back. Glaucus, leader of the Lycian spearmen, was the first to turn around. He killed great-hearted Bathocles, Chalcon's dear son, who lived at home in Hellas, a man preeminent among the Myrmidons for a wealthy and successful life. With his spear, Glaucus turned suddenly as Bathocles came up in pursuit, then struck him in the middle of his chest. He fell down with a crash. Achaeans felt keen sorrow that such a worthy man had fallen, but Trojans, elated, gathered in a crowd to make a stand around him. Achaeans did not forget their courage. They brought their fighting spirit to the Trojans. Meriones killed a well-armed Trojan warrior, Laogonus, daring son of Onetor, a priest of Zeus and Ida, honored by his people like a god. Meriones threw and hit him underneath the jaw. His spirit swiftly left his limbs, and he was carried off by hateful darkness. Then Aeneas, hoping to hit Meriones as he advanced under the shield, threw his bronze spear at him. But Meriones, looking right at Aeneas, evaded that bronze spear by bending forward. The long spear impaled itself behind him in the ground, its shaft still quivering, until strong Ares took away its power. With anger in his heart, Aeneas then called out, Meriones, you're a lovely dancer, but if my spear had hit you, your dancing days would have ended for all time to come. Famous spearman Meriones then replied, Aeneas, you may be brave, but it's hard for you to crush the fighting strength of every man who stands to defend himself against you. For you too are made of mortal stuff. If my bronze spear hit you in the middle of your body, then no matter what your courage or how much trust you place in your strong hands, you'd quickly give me glory, and your life to famous horseman Hades. Meriones spoke, but then Menetius, noble son, reprimanded him. Meriones, why do you, an honorable man, talk on like this? My friend, Trojans won't move back from the corpse because someone abuses them with words. They won't budge until the earth holds many men. Our task here is to battle with our hands. The assembly is the place for speeches. We don't need more talk. We need to fight. Saying this, Patroclus led off, and Meriones, that godlike man, went too. Then the turmoil started. Just like the din woodcutters make in mountain forests, a noise heard far away, that's how it sounded then. The clamoring rising from the widely traveled earth, a clash of bronze and leather, well-made ox shields as they fought there with two-edged spears and swords. Not even a man who knew Sarpedon very well could recognize him then, covered with blood and dirt and weapons from the soles of his feet up to his head. For men were swarming round the corpse like farmyard flies, clustering by buckets full of milk in springtime when milk overflows the pails. That how those warriors buzzed around Sarpedon then. Zeus's bright eyes never once glanced from that brutal combat, gazing down and thinking in his heart of many different things about how Lord Patroclus ought to meet his death, wondering whether glorious Hector should cut him down with his bronze in that bitter fighting there over godlike Sarpedon and then strip the armor from his shoulders, or whether he should multiply grim misery for still more men. As Zeus pondered, he thought the best plan would be to let Patroclus, brave companion of Achilles, son of Peleus, drive the Trojans and bronze-armed Hector back again, towards their city, destroying the lives of many men. So Zeus first took the courage out of Hector's heart, so that he jumped into his chariot and turned in flight, calling to other Trojans to run back, for he knew that Zeus's scared scales were changing. The Lycians, though brave, did not hold their ground. They all fled back once they saw their king struck through the heart, lying there in a pile of bodies. Many men had fallen down on top of him, when Cronos' son intensified fierce conflict. So the Achaeans stripped Sarpedon, pulling the gleaming bronze from off his shoulders. Menetius' brave son gave it to his companions to carry to the hollow ships. At that moment, cloud-gatherer Zeus spoke to Apollo. "Up now, dear Phoebus, and move Sarpedon out of range. When you've cleared the dark blood of his body, take him somewhere far away and wash him in a flowing river. Next, anoint him with ambrosia, and put immortal clothes around him. Then you must hand him over to those swift messengers, Sleep and Death, twin brothers, to carry off with them. They'll quickly place him in his own rich land, wide Lycia, where his brothers and kinsmen will bury him and mound the headstone, as is appropriate for those who've died." Zeus finished. Apollo did not disobey his father. Descending from Mount Ida to the lethal war, he carried Lord Sarpedon quickly out of range. After taking him a long way off, he washed him in a flowing river. Next, he anointed him with ambrosia and put immortal clothes around him. Then Apollo gave Sarpedon up to Sleep and Death, swift messengers, twin brothers, to take with them. They quickly set him down in spacious Lycia, his own rich land. Patroclus then called to his horses and to Automedon to pursue the Trojans, the Lycians as well. How blind he was, poor fool! If he'd done what the son of Peleus had told him, he'd have missed his evil fate, his own dark death. But Zeus's mind is always stronger than a man's. He can make even a brave man fearful, rob him of his victory with ease. And Zeus can rouse a man for battle, as he did then, putting desire to fight into Patroclus' chest. "Who was the first warrior you killed, Patroclus, and who the last, that time the gods called you onto earth?" Adrestus was the first, then Autonous, then Echeclus, Primus, son of Megas, Epistor, and Melanippus. Then Patroclus killed Elaeus, Mulius, and Pylanthes. The other Trojans, each and every one of them, set their minds on flight. At that point, Achaea's son would have captured Troy and its highest gates, but Patroclus' hands, as he raged with his frenzied spear. But for Phoebus Apollo, who stood there on the well-built wall, intending to destroy Patroclus and assist the Trojans. Three times Patroclus started to climb up a corner on that high wall. 3 times Apollo shoved him back, his immortal hands repelling the bright shield. But when Patroclus, for the 4th time, came on like some god, Apollo, with a terrific cry, shouted these winged words at him. "Go back, divinely born Patroclus. The city of proud Trojans, according to its fate, will not be ravaged by your spear, nor even by Achilles, a far better man than you." Apollo spoke. Patroclus drew back a little, evading the anger of Apollo, the far shooter. Meanwhile, Hector pulled his sure-footed horses up beside the Chian gate, uncertain what to do. Drive back to the confusion and then battle on? Or tell his soldiers to gather there inside the walls? As he was thinking, Phoebus Apollo approached in the form of Asius, a strong young man, horse-taming Hector's uncle, Hecuba's blood brother, Dymas' son, who lived by the river Sangarius in Phrygia. In that shape, Apollo, Zeus' son, spoke out. "Hector, why withdraw from battle? That's not worthy of you. I wish I were more powerful than you, as much as you are superior to me. Then you'd quickly leave this battle in disgrace. But come on, drive your strong-footed horses at Patroclus so you can kill him, and then Apollo can give you glory." Saying these words, Apollo left, a god among the toiling men. Glorious Hector then told fiery Cebriones to lash the horses, drive them to battle. Apollo slipped into the throng of fighting men. He totally confused the Argives, conferring glory on Hector and his Trojans. The rest of the Danaans Hector left alone, not killing any of them. His sure-footed horses were heading at Patroclus, who, for his part, jumped down from his chariot to the ground, holding a spear in his left hand, and in his right hand he gripped a stone, a large jagged rock, his fingers wrapping around it. Taking a firm stance, he went for Hector right away. He threw the rock and did not waste his throw. He hit Cerebones, Hector's charioteer, a bastard son of famous Priam, as he held onto the reins. The sharp rock struck him on the forehead, bashing in his eyebrows, breaking through the skull. His 2 eyes dropped down into the ground, in the dust right at his feet. Like a diver, Cerebones toppled over, out of the well-made chariot. His spirit left his bones. Then, horseman Patroclus, you made fun of him. Well now, that's an agile man. What a graceful driver. If we were on the fish-filled sea somewhere, he'd fed a lot of men by catching oysters, jumping over in the roughest water, judging from that easy dive he made out of his chariot into the plain. I suppose those Trojans must have acrobats as well. This said, Patroclus rushed at warrior Cerebones, moving like a lion who, while savaging some farm, is hit by a chest, so his own courage kills him. That's how you, Patroclus, rushed at Cerebones in your killing frenzy. Opposing him, Hector leapt from his chariot down to the ground. The two men then battled over Cerebones, like two lions struggling on a mountain peak over a slaughtered deer, both ravenous, both filled with fighting fury. That's how those two masters of the war shout fought. Patroclus, Minucius' son, and glorious Hector over Cerebones, both keen to slash each other's flesh with pitiless bronze. Hector grabbed the corpse's head, refusing to let go. At the other end, Patroclus gripped the feet. A desperate struggle then ensued among the Trojans and Danaans fighting there. Just as east and south winds challenge one another in mountain forests, shaking up deep stands of oak, ash, and tapering cornel trees, hurling slim branches one against the other with tremendous noise as the branches snap, that's how Trojans and Achaeans collided with each other in that conflict. Neither side had any thought of ruinous flight. Around Cerebones, many spears were driven home. Many winged arrows flew from bowstrings. Many boulders crashed on shields as men kept fighting round him. The great man Cerebones, proud of his glory, just lay there in the swirling dust, his horsemanship now quite forgotten. As long as the sun kept moving through the middle sky, weapons from both sides found their mark. Men kept on dying. But when the sun came to the point which shows the time has come to unyoke oxygen, then Achaeans, contravening fate, were stronger. They dragged warrior Cerebones out of range, away from shouting Trojans, and stripped the armor off his shoulders. Then Patroclus charged the Trojans, intent on slaughter. 3 times he assaulted them, like war god Ares, with terrific shouts. 3 times he killed 9 men. But when he attacked a 4th time, then, Patroclus, you saw your life end. For Phoebus, the terrible god in that grim fight, came up against you. Patroclus failed to see Apollo as he moved through the confusion, for he advanced towards him, hidden in the thick mist. Apollo stood behind him. Then, with the flat of his hand, he struck Patroclus on his back, on his broad shoulders, that made his eyes lose focus. Next, Phoebus Apollo knocked the helmet from his head. The horsehair crest rolled with a clatter under horses' feet. The dust and blood then stained the helmet's plumes. Up to that time, gods had not let that helmet with its horsehair plume get smudged with dirt, for it was always guarding godlike Achilles' head, his noble forehead too. Later, Zeus awarded it to Hector to carry on his head, as his death loomed in Patroclus' hands, his heavy, long-shadowed spear, thick and strong, with its bronze point, was completely smashed. His tasseled shield and strap fell from his shoulders, down on the ground. Next, Apollo, Zeus's son, loosened his body armor on Patroclus. His mind went blank, his fine limbs grew limp, and he stood there in a daze. From close behind, Euphorbus, son of Pantheus, a Dardan warrior, hit him in the back, with a sharp spear between his shoulder blades. Euphorbus surpassed all men the same age as him in spear throwing, horsemanship, and speed on foot. He'd already knocked 20 men out of their chariots, and that was the first time he'd come with his own horses to learn something of war. Euphorbus was the first to strike you, horseman Patroclus, but he failed to kill you. Pulling the spear out of Patroclus' flesh, Euphorbus ran back again and to blend in with the throng. He did not stand his ground, even though Patroclus had no weapons for a fight. So Patroclus, overwhelmed by the god's blow and spear, withdrew, back to the group of his companions, avoiding death. But when Hector noticed brave Patroclus going back, wounded by sharp bronze, he moved up through the ranks, stood close to Patroclus, and struck him with his spear, low in the stomach, driving the bronze straight through. Patroclus fell with a crash, and Achaea's army was filled with anguish. Just as a lion overcomes a tireless wild boar in combat, when both beasts fight bravely in the mountainous over a small spring where they both want to drink, and the lion's strength brings down the panting boar, that's how Hector, moving close in his spear, destroyed the life of Minucius's noble son, who'd killed so many. Then Hector spoke winged words of triumph over him. Patroclus, you thought you'd raise our city, robbing our women of their life and freedom, taking them in ships to your dear native land. You fool. In front of them, Hector's horses, swift of foot, came out to fight. With the spear, I'm the very best war-loving Trojan, and I've saved them from your fatal day. Now vultures will eat you here. You poor wretch. Even Achilles, for all his courage, was no use to you. Though he stayed behind, he must have given you strict orders as you left. Don't return to me, horseman Patroclus, at the hollow ships until you've slashed blood all over man-killing Hector's tunic from his own chest. That's what he must have said to win you over to such foolishness. Then you, horseman Patroclus, your strength all gone, replied, boast on, Hector, for the moment. Zeus, son of Cronos and Apollo, have given you victory. They overcame me easily, for they personally removed the armor from my shoulders. If 20 men came to confront me just like you, all would have died, slaughtered by my spear. But deadly fate and Leto's son have slain me, and Euphorbus. So you're the third in line at my death. But I'll tell you something else, and bear this in mind. You'll not live long yourself. Your death is already standing close at hand, a fatal power. For you'll be destroyed, and at brave Achilles' hand, descendant of Aeacus. As Patroclus said these words to Hector, the finality of death flowed over him. His spirit fluttered from his limbs and went to Hades, lamenting its own fate, the loss of youthful manhood. As Patroclus died, splendid Hector spoke to him. Patroclus, why predict my own death for me? Who knows? It may happen that Achilles, son of fair-haired Thetis, is hit first by a spear of mine and gives up his life. As he said this, Hector set his foot down on the corpse, pulled the bronze spear from the wound, and pushed the body backwards. Then, with that spear he set off at once, going after Automedon, godlike attendant to the swift-footed kinsman of Aeacus, eager to strike him. But he'd been carried off by those swift immortal horses, the priceless gift presented by the gods of Peleus. Thanks for listening.